Hello and welcome to this new game review. We'll have a look at a few fragments from this game where white played basically flawlessly and didn't give black much of a chance, but of course, as usual, we can resist more. So let's take a look a little bit. So it started as the Bogo Indian defense, so this is a variation. It's not bad, it's not great. Probably if we want to play with b6, then we should probably play b6 here and play the Queen's Indian defense. But this variation also has its merits. The point is to get rid of this dark squared bishop and then hopefully put our pawns on dark squares, which will compensate for the lack of this bishop. So white plays bishop d2, and here black plays queen e7, which is considered the main line. And after g3, black plays knight c6, which is also the main move. Nowadays it's considered that this position is not too great for black. This knight on c6 is not very well placed, and if white is accurate, he can hope for some advantage. And here, after bishop d2, here white makes a small inaccuracy, and because after queen d2, which is kind of natural to put the knight on c3, this is considered inaccurate because of this specific move knight e4, and black really has to look for this dynamic possibilities. Because his position is not great, white has a lot of space, and if white gets to take all this space, he will be better. But after knight e4 specifically, and queen c2, there is this annoying check with queen to b4. Here white could move the king, but this is a bit unnatural, and after the natural knight c3, black can exchange, and for example here he would win a pawn, and after this we could get this endgame, which is considered quite good for black. His main plan would be to put his pieces in a position to attack the c4 pawn, and due to this doubled pawns, white cannot really make any effective pawn breaks. The position is of course about equal, but both sides have their chances. But black did not do this. He continued to play with d6, but this got him into a passive position, and though the position here is still fine after the pieces are developed, and black is suffering a little bit because this tension doesn't really favor him. Black should probably already take or play e4. For example here, this is a known structure which is a little bit bad for black because of this square on d5. White will eventually put a knight here, and if black ever takes, he will take back with the c pawn and open up the rook towards this bad pawn on c7. And if we don't take the knight, well then we will have to play c6 at some point, but this would weaken the pawn on d6. So this is simply not very good for black, but it's the best he can do. Or he can go e4, which is also a typical idea, and for example after knight h2, e3, black would get some kind of dynamic play in the center. And as usual, when we're down positionally, we should play dynamically. But instead, black missed his moment, and after knight d5, now the structure changes. And from here, white played very well. This is a very good structure for white, as he is looking at this pawn on c7. And after a3, knight a6, white continued to play very well. And a few moves later, there was this combination starting with queen takes b7, which seems to lose the queen for white, but white presumably had calculated this. Queen a8 and knight e5. So for the moment, white has a rook and two pawns for the queen, but now he is taking the bishop, and at this moment he has more material, and if black had taken back, then bishop c6 at the end of this would pick up the rook, and then the passed pawn would decide with rook c8. So very good calculation by white. And after rook d8, this is also losing for white, for black I mean, especially after rook c6. And here there wasn't much chance for black. His knight is not enough to stop the passed pawn, and from here white won quite easily. But here there wasn't much to do for black apart from this move knight e4, and this is kind of a known variation from this whole complex of openings. Here white is supposed to take back with the knight, and the knight is not very well placed here, and now black can do the same thing as he did in the game with the knight on a worse square. But he allowed the queen to stay on d2, which he shouldn't have. and here he would have played and gotten a pretty decent position.